So I'd like to welcome everyone to our second session, all about surviving and thriving COVID-19, and that connect is the key. And so I wanted to let everyone know we're trying format here with the webinar version. It looks a little different than normal Zoom chats. You just see myself and Dr. Jean Clinton. And so if you have questions at the bottom, you'll see a Q&A box, and that's the perfect place to put a question for Dr. Clinton, and I will watch that and I will ask those questions for you. The chat box, you can give a general message to the panelists. So I think that's pretty straightforward. We are recording tonight, so we will be able to post this up later on for later viewing. So Dr. Jean Clinton, welcome back. Dr. Jean, gracious in coming and talking to us, and I wanted just to welcome you back. And we are excited to hear some more about what you have to share with us. Welcome back, Dr. Jean. We're so happy that you're coming back with us again about surviving and thriving in COVID-19, and that connection is the key. So, Jean, if you don't mind, can you recap for us the session 2 talk that we had about digging deeper into emotions? If you could give a very brief recap about what we talked about last time.
Sure, I'd love to do that, Sue. I really enjoyed our time together, and I'm hoping that the sound is working okay as I'm speaking. So, what you first asked me, Sue, was about how we should speak to children about COVID-19, and I had first talked about that the most important thing is, first of all, to put on your own mask first. And that is before helping the kids deal with their emotions and questions, that we really need to figure out our own emotional state and think about what are we feeling, what are we experiencing, and sort it out before we start answering kids. And then once we've done that, then the most important thing to do is, first of all, listen to what the children are asking. So I'm wondering, just to, let's stop for a second and just see if, Paul, how is this going? Is the sound working out okay?
Yes, the sound's working out well. I've tried to move my computer and I don't know what else to do. Yeah, we can hear you, but it's a bit choppy.
It's a bit choppy.
Okay, well, perhaps we can, yeah.
So
it does sound choppy at my end.
That's more of a distraction.
Perhaps we'll just a little bit longer.
Yeah, or should we reschedule and just try with a regular Zoom call? Yeah, people are saying that it's that it is quite choppy. So I'm happy to have to reschedule. People are saying they can hear me okay.
Okay, they can hear you well, Dr. Jean. I'm wondering, there is a question in the Q&A. We could see how it goes for another few minutes, and otherwise we can just continue next week and maybe make it a longer session, perhaps. People seem to be hearing me.
But yeah, I'm happy to try on for a few more minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you can hear me? So people can hear me. All right.
Paula and Jean.
Okay.
Yeah.
How about video? Can people see Dr. Jean, have you turned off your video?
My video is completely off to improve bandwidth.
Okay. I will read you, Dr. Jean. They seem to say that our audio is good.
I can do.
Sorry, what did you say, Dr. Jean?
Okay. Yep. So that's great. So if you and I have a thumbs up, then maybe we can just proceed and for a little bit and see how it goes. And if not, Dr.
Okay.
Jean is choppy. It's only Paula that's very clear.
Okay. So let's try this. There is a few questions in the,
Okay.
there's a question in the box in a Q&A. And so when my school board is telling us to focus on literacy and math, do you have any suggestions on how to incorporate this important social emotional learning into our distance learning? This is so obvious that students and parents are asking for connection.
Right. Oh, yes. Such an important question. I think that what we need to do is to be, what's the right word for being underwater, making sure that we do what they ask us to do, also have our agenda completed. And that is making sure that we're connecting to kids, making them feel that they're really important, making them have a sense of belonging in the activities that we do through math and literacy. You know, there's such a wide variety of districts are seeing to do, all the way from, you know, I was speaking with the school board this morning, and the director of education says, we are not going to give marks, we are not going to give grades. What you need to be focusing on is emotional development and making them feel safe. And then another board saying you have to stuff the duck and get the math and literacy. So let's go underwater and make sure that we are doing all of the things that we know are so important for kids as we do the math and literacy work, but we don't do drill and kill. We engage them and ask them about their life and their work just now, what they're having fun doing. I think we have to be, I can't think of the right words now, but a kind of disruptors, but compliant, I would say.
Thank you. Thank you. It's so true about the drilling. Really focusing on the connections that people have, for sure. We have another question in the Q&A box. So folks, if you can hear me, that's wonderful. We're going to try to moderate this. And if you have any questions for Dr. Jean, just put them in the Q&A at the bottom of your panel. Dr. Jean, we have another question from the audience, and it was, I was wondering if we could dive a bit deeper into being stress detectives that you mentioned in the second segment, and the 5 different stressors and the 5 domains of self-regulation. Would you be able to do that?
Yeah, let's just try here. I want to see if I can maybe share my screen and see if this comes up for people.
It really does.
Is it coming up?
Do people see this?
It does. Okay.
Woohoo! Okay, awesome.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Aha. Yeah, I learned how to do this the other day. So this is the absolutely wonderful Kristen Weens. And so this is Dr. Stuart Shanker. And he says to us that, you know, you see behavior and it's just like that tip of the iceberg. And what it may be telling us is there are stressors that the child is experiencing in maybe the biological domain, or the emotional domain, or the social, or the pro-social, or the cognitive domain. And it means we have to be a stress detective and see, is what's happening now the fact that the little one biologically is tired, is hungry, is cold, there's too much noise going on, so biologically being bombarded with things that are showing in their behavior, not saying, oh, I'm hungry, mother, but instead letting their behavior show this way. Or are they under emotional stressors? Are they feeling that the expectation placed on them from others is just too much for them? Are there social stressors, getting along with others, learning to take turns? Pro-social, seeing about being empathetic as a pressure, or cognitive, that the demands at this point in time for their learning are beyond their emotional ability. So what Stuart Shanker does is really ask us to see that that misbehavior is really coming from lagging skills, if you like, in the world of collaborative problem solving. And so what Stuart says next to do is, once you're starting to say, well, where is this? What is it that's happening? The very first thing that you need to do is to reframe the behavior and say, this is stress behavior, not misbehavior. Then you examine all of the domains, because there could be 4 or 5 going at the same time, to recognize what might the stressor be. What might the stressors be? And once you recognize that, then you reduce the stressors. So what can you do? Biologically, say it is too much noise in the classroom, then you can have that cozy corner, or you can have earphones. If it is a cognitive stressor, then you can help the little one see what is it that they're interested in, rather than what you're pressuring or feel pressured to do. So reduce that stressor, and then do a reflection to let the little one know, hey, and you as well as the educator or the parent, to say, oh, you know, I really noticed this. I remember my son Andrew, who was a very easygoing, temperamentally, very easygoing. And at 4, he started to be way more challenging, all relative, right? And what it was that when he got hungry, he actually got hangry. And we were so unused to seeing it in him. So we were able to help him see, when I'm around this time of day, when I'm feeling hungry, that's what I'm experiencing. And so then you can respond with strategies. So you feed them. There are little ones who will need to be energized, so that they, if the things are going on along too long, that what they need is an upregulating activity, to be jumping about and running about, ways to restore that energy and develop resilience. So that's the Stuart Shanker kind of model of self-reg that we've talked about before.
Thank you so much. That was really a wonderful way to explain it, and thank you for bringing your visuals to help us with that. There's a question about someone wanting more clarity around the ruler method, and I remember you mentioned that in the segment. If you have a moment.
Sure. Okay. Yep. So the ruler method is I do happen to have a slide on it. The ruler method was developed by the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence, and I've been learning more about it because I had a real fun time with Mark Brackett, who developed it. He and I were on a webinar together. And so this is from, he's written a book called Permission to Feel, which I'm waiting to arrive. And what he says is that we really need to start being better at understanding and being the master, if you like, of our emotions, because our feelings really impact our life. When you think about it, we're learning that emotions are hugely important in our learning. And in fact, I'm doing some research on scientists who says that I feel, therefore I learn. Our emotions, this is up in the top corner, our emotions are also hugely influential on our decision making. And just think when you go out shopping and you're hungry, and you're a bit short on time and a bit short on temper, how your shopping cart looks very different than when you go in a very different emotional state. Our feelings, as is so obvious, affect our emotions, our relationship, our health, physical and mental well-being, and our creativity. So what Mark and his team have said is that let's work with all kids and adults to look at the ruler method. So R is for recognize. You need to pause throughout the day and check in with your mind and body to recognize what is it that I am feeling at this exact moment. What is my emotional state? So that's the R. The U is for understand. Be an emotion scientist, he says. Why are you feeling this way? What's causing it? And that's you asking, what could have triggered this feeling? L is for label. Put your feelings into words. This is so huge. All of you guys who work with toddlers will have seen the absolute miracle of when kids start to label their emotions, they're better able to be the boss of those emotions. So put your feelings into words. Be specific. Broaden your emotional vocabulary. Are you sad, melancholy, unfulfilled? And the research, he had a terrific podcast with Brainy Brown, Unplugging Us or Unplugged Us. And Brainy was saying that she has done some research and people say that they've got 3 emotions, mad, sad, and glad. But when he's done his, we've got many, many more emotions than that. So labeling them, understanding where they're coming from is really important. And then once you're recognizing, understanding, and labeling, then you can learn how best to express them. So that's converting those emotions into words. That actually improves your health. So when you talk about your problems or you write them down, the evidence that he's accumulating is it actually helps you. It helps your health. So he suggests that you find people with whom you feel safe being vulnerable. And you know, the wonderful work Brown has done around being brave, being vulnerable. And then the last ultimate goal is to regulate. So experts recommend three strategies for regulating your emotion. First of all, perform positive self-talk in the third person. So you can say, all right, this internet stuff is never going to work. Or you can say, Jean, the internet comes with frustration. We can deal with this. We can move on with it. Jean, just take your time and enjoy what you can enjoy. Reframe your feelings in a positive way. Reframe them in a positive way. And when you feel a negative emotion, ask, what would my best self do? Isn't that a fantastic thing to think about? What would my best self do?
Love it.
Well, sometimes my best self is somebody else. So I think about what would my friend Robin do? But
Yeah.
what would your best self do? So that's the ruler. It's a really terrific frame that I'm learning more about. It's part of self-regulation. It's part of social and emotional learning. It's part of well-being, but really unlocking this power of emotion to help our kids, ourselves, and our society thrive. So thanks for that question. I think it's really great. Permission to Feel is the name of the book by Mark Brackett.
Well, that is just wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that. I really enjoy this, the acronym of ruler. And I just had a great idea. I think you should do a podcast with Brene Brown. What do you say?
Hey.
2 of you.
Yeah, wow. Wouldn't that be cool?
Yes. And Mark Brackett, my goodness, just the
Yeah,
idea.
we would have a riot. We would have a riot because he is a very nice and very funny guy. And so is Brene from what I've heard. Yeah.
Yes, wonderful. Well, she's just I just love the idea of the regulating the third person positive and your best self. I just love those messages of the regulating. Just wonderful. We've got a few more questions in the Q&A box, so I'm just going to direct, just let me see. Okay. One of the questions is, once we know the stress behavior and emotions the children are experiencing, what kind of appropriate questions or how can we help the children when they are under this type of stress?
Great question. I think the things that you've known all along as early childhood educators, parents, and teachers is the number one thing to do is to validate the feelings. And you know, if what's hard is we're almost trained to particularly negative feelings. We're almost trained to make them go away, to tell the kids, oh no, don't worry about the wind, it's not going to be too strong. Rather, we're kind of trained to neutralize those feelings. But what we need to be doing is validating them and saying, oh, that is a very big, strong wind. What do you think of that wind? So you validate the feeling, you sit with the child as they're having the feeling, and then you ask them, well, what can you do to make that bad feeling or that not nice feeling, what can you do to make it go away? What do you like to do that makes you feel better, that makes you feel happy? But first of all, keep in mind that being with that feeling is so important. Why do we say that now? Because we've had so many years of kids being told not to feel. As adults, you know, there is a absolute epidemic of people with anxiety and depression just now, and many clinicians think that it is because for many years as a society we've been told you can't have those, don't have those feelings. You're weak if you get depressed. You're weak if you're anxious, and it just hasn't helped. It hasn't helped at all. So that is the identifying, the labeling, the naming, and the sitting with. All are very helpful.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jean. Really great advice for everyone. Another question that's come on is, let's see, this has to do, oh, well, there's a few questions that have to do with like, what do you say to parents feeling stressed by homework demands from schools as they feel they do not have the ability to teach required assignments?
Yes, well, I can give you the unfiltered version of that.
Okay.
In fact, the Canadian Pediatric Society, my friend Dr. Robin Williams and I have a piece coming out in the Globe and Mail, an op-ed. An opinion piece that we really are saying that employers have to stop thinking that things are normal and people can work as hard as they were at home in the same way as they were before COVID. And they also, educators, parents are not teachers. They can support learning at home, but we cannot expect the same outcomes at home in this time as we did before. So back off, buddy. Give us some space. What we know kids are going to remember is how they felt during this period of time. And I've spoken to so many educators who say, we're professionals. Our job when the kids come back to school is to get them, catch them where they are and figure out how to get them to where they can reach their greatest potential. So again, we've got such variability across the province, across the world actually, that nobody has the right answer. So anybody who says, this is the way you do it, you say, well, you know, maybe not. So kids need to be playing, need to be feeling felt and have a sense of belonging at home during this period of time. And in fact, some kids are saying, I love learning at home. How come school can't be more like this? So we've got lots of lessons to learn. So lay off, follow the children's lead, and follow your own level of anxiety around what am I doing that's improving my relationship with my kids, and what is it that's detrimental to it? Because we cannot ask parents to do things that are detrimental to the relationship they have with their children. Under no formulation is that the right thing to do.
Well, that's just wonderful.
Can you tell I feel a wee bit strongly about that, Paul?
Oh, just a bit. I can't wait to read that article in the Globe and Mail. You always express your opinions in such a constructive way, and you're so supportive of parents. But I think that's such a wonderful message that they are doing. I really like when you said they're going to remember this time. Of how people, how they're going to remember how they felt around this time, and not so much perhaps how the homework was done, but that their parents were supporting them during this time.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's great.
Absolutely.
Question.
Get outside and play. Get outside
Yes,
and play and read.
that's right.
Yep.
I think, yeah. So, yeah, again, I think we've mentioned it in the video. It's like there are some educators that are realizing that, you know, might not be lagging behind. They're actually might be even doing well during this time. Okay, I have a question. Ooh, a few questions from the audience. Thank you, everyone. I have a question, and it says, I've worked with children adjusting to a new culture. We discussed the good and bad things that happen with change. Do you think this is a wise time to discuss with children the good things that they feel, as well as those the losses and the bad things?
So I always think that if we can, first of all, listen and hear what it is that children want to share with us. As adults, and I'm terrible at this, jumping to conclusions is my biggest exercise. So I think we need to slow down and really, really listen to what is it that kids are telling us. And then we need to ask them, what is it that they know that they would like to know more about? So if it tends to the good of what's going on around them, then we explore that with them. If it's their worries about some of the negative that's going on around them, then we help them deal with that, but keeping in mind that we don't want to burden them with adult concerns, but only give them issues or talk to them about issues that they have some control over. It doesn't make any sense to be talking about, for example, COVID-19, unless we're talking to them about the things that they can do themselves, that they can wash their hands a lot, that they can sneeze into their elbow, that they can keep their social distance when they're out, that they can send messages to their grandparents. So it always needs to be developmentally appropriate, thinking about what the kids can deal with and where their questions are coming from. I wonder if that answers the question.
I
If there's
think
any
it would.
follow-up from that question, I'm happy to do that.
Okay, thank you. One of the questions also was if you would be able to share that ruler slide, the ruler method slide with us perhaps after this session.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay.
For sure, I'd be more than happy to.
Okay.
And also, I think on the bottom of it, there was the recording where the podcast that you can go to hear Brainy and Mark Brackett.
Oh,
so yeah,
wonderful.
I'll share that slide for sure.
Thank you so much. That would be wonderful. I'm sure that would be of interest to many. I have a question regarding how do educators best support each other through stress when they return to the program? Like, how can they support each other through this stress?
Oh, what a great, yes, absolutely. I think, well, first of all, it is so important to be working and thinking collaboratively together, and to be sharing that we're all going through this. So I think that's the first thing to set. If you're a centre that hasn't had many staff meetings, make that a priority, that you are going to get together, that you are going to say, how has it been for you even before the kids arrive, that you're going to be talking to each other about what was hard for you, what worked well for you, what did you learn about yourself. So you want to, I think it's a wonderful opportunity to start a reflective practice in your work, a collaborative, professional, reflective practice within your centers. I think the other aspect of things that's really important is to ask people along these same lines, what was the biggest learning you had from COVID-19? What are your fears and what are your worries? So that you as a group realize, oh God, we're all in the same thing. We had these ups and these downs. We were terrified. What's your worry? I'm worried that when the kids come back, they're all going to be dysregulated and it's going to be a nightmare. And then you start saying, okay, how do we manage our stress. And we've got great science tells you how to manage stress. And stress is good for us, first of all. It's only when it gets too much that it's bad for us, when it becomes unpredictable, it becomes overwhelming. So you need to look at the pattern of stress and say, how can I make it more predictable? Can I make it so that there's only moderate stress? Let's see if I've got a slide here that I might be able to share. Hang on.
Okay.
So you want to make the stress more moderate, more predictable, and here we are. And there are ways that you can go about. Doing that. Let me just slip up here and see if you can get it.
Okay.
My slide sharing's not working. This has been a very bizarre evening, everyone.
Oh dear.
Is it showing you now? Can you see the slide?
I'm going to start sharing.
Paula?
No, it doesn't show. I'm going to switch something. Maybe try now.
It doesn't. Okay.
Okay, we're starting.
Okay. Can you see it now?
No. Yes, now we can.
It should say managing your structure.
Yes, exactly. Thank you.
Okay. So when we're starting to get together and we want to be more supportive of each other, then you can create. So this is from that great article that I mentioned last time from Psychology Today, which is called The Parent's Guide to a Pandemic Toolkit, or
Yes.
The COVID-19 Parent's Guide to Pandemic Toolkit, or words along that will include it. Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
And so think about what can you do. Yeah, what can you do in your center as you return to moderate stress, to make it more predictable and more controllable? So for families during COVID, what my friend Bruce Perry is talking about is to create structure. So in the center, as you each are coming back, how can you create predictability? Not rigidity, but predictability. How can you create the equivalent of family meals so that you've got your check-in points throughout the day, but you're not just checking in with the kids, you're checking in with each other, asking how are things going? And if you look at these as examples of how you make the environment more predictable, then you see that there are things that you can do. What we worry about is when that stress is more chaotic, because when it is more chaotic, when it's severe and prolonged and uncontrollable, that leads to more vulnerability. So that's these things that families that they talk about in that article, about families not having structure, comfort eating, too much media, not exercising, emotional isolation. So I think one of the things that will be fun for us to think about as a group at ASCY, and I'm happy to do this with you, is what are the equivalencies of this in a center? Because when we're doing it for the kids, we're also doing it for ourselves.
I think that's such a great point about, I love this slide about some of the parts of your day that you can put into to support your, to promote resilience. And I have to say, I love the idea about having their meals together. I just feel that in a center, when you sit down and take that moment to share the meal with the children in your program, that you are connecting with them, and it makes it a valuable time. And not just a rush routine to get through, but just be in the moment and really connect. I think more so than ever when we go back.
Completely, Paula, completely. You know, that connect before correct principle, I think is something that that's going to be essential to be thinking of a priority, that relationships, creating that sense of belonging for each other as well as for the kids. So
Absolutely.
that connecting and sense of belonging, it needs to be an absolute priority. Yeah.
Right. No, that's wonderful. Yes, I think those are really great points to consider when we return. Another question has to do about, really good question, how does connection help neutralize the stress? And so It's interesting. I think we kind of touched on it, but I mean, you might want to dive deeper into it.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, so how connection works to neutralize the stress is beauteous in chemistry and chemical terms, because when you connect with a child, or when you connect with another adult that has a meaningful connection where you actually feel felt by them, your reward neurotransmitters in the brain get released. Isn't that fantastic?
That is wonderful.
Fantastic. So connecting with kids, that reward neurotransmitter releases, that's dopamine releases. As well, you get a release of another neurotransmitter called oxytocin when you have a sense of belonging, and they neutralize the stress hormone cortisol, which affects the the working of the learning part of the brain, the hippocampus, and other parts of the brain as well, and other parts of the body if you've got too much cortisol going on. So I love that. I love that question, because it really dives into the neurobiology of why love builds brains.
Oh, that's so lovely. You're so passionate about it. Obviously, it's
Yeah.
what is so near and dear to your heart.
Yeah.
We had a question today about infants, and it's what are some of the behaviors parents or educators might watch for in very young and nonverbal infants in order for them to see the cues that for them to see that the infants might be in stress.
Oh, wow. So that's a lovely, lovely question. In fact, all of our public health nurses have been trained in a program that comes out of Washington State University, I think it's Washington State, called Infant Cues or Baby Cues. And so I think what we need to teach lots of parents and infant caregivers is that the babies are continually sending out signals to their environment. You know, they have stages of alertness and drowsiness, and there are times when they're ready to play and times when they're not ready to play. They give you subtle cues when they've had enough, like turning away, changing their body, how they hold their body, pushing away. So it's really important that we learn how to observe babies and follow their lead. And it's absolutely wonderful. The T. Barry Brazelton has a whole behavioral assessment of the newborn that turns parents' brains on to absolutely be crazy about their little ones. You know, the way they turn their head, the way they raise their eyes. It's just magnificent, but it requires a belief that the baby is competent and capable of communicating right from the very, very start. Yeah, so if you look up baby cues, you'll see lots and lots of information about how to read those babies' cues. And the distress signals are, of course, they've got crying, but all the turning away, the squawking, the squirming.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Those are that's wonderful cues to look for when in infants. And I guess there was another question I might have missed earlier that kind of goes along with this one on once we know the stress behavior and the emotions that children are experiencing, what kind of appropriate questions or how can we help the children when they're under this type of stress?
Yeah, well, I think the labeling, the helping the child identify themselves, what it is that they're physically feeling, and you know, wouldn't it be we've got a whole new area of interpersonal neurobiology, where people are actually seeing what the mind-body connection is, and that our body tells us a whole lot about what we're feeling and what's in our mind. But as adults, most of us have been trained not to experience that. So won't it be wonderful if we all start helping kids recognize what emotions feel like in their own body? I remember one of my young, a patient that I had who had autism, And he said that when he's anxious, that it felt like there was a whole mountain of worms just squirming away, and he was trying very hard to get up to the top of that mountain. So giving kids language to understand what it feels like in their body is so very important. You know, as kids learn that when I feel that I'm starting to tighten my hands, I know that I'm upset about something. So
Right.
giving them the language, the body language and knowledge, the verbal language and knowledge, we know that when they have that, then the limbic system and the prefrontal cortex start making more connections. You name it to tame it and claim it.
I love that. Name it to tame it to claim it. My goodness. So much, isn't it? Our work is so complex. I really, I love just the idea about, you know, labeling, helping you touched on it before about infants being competent and then that they are competent to identify their feelings and to give them the language to help them. Builds on their self-efficacy and I love, yeah, for sure. We had another question here about our older toddler. Older toddlers were scheduled to move to preschool in June. How do we approach this transition, taking into consideration the stress of returning and going to new educators in a new classroom? We touched on this actually today, that, you know, some infants might be ready to be toddlers when we return. But and so, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think you guys know the answer to this better than I do, but so just from my instinct, it is to bring kids back to the familiar, that they settle back into what's known to them rather than start something completely new for them. So the familiar is soothing. The brain does not like unpredictability very much. It much prefers predictability. So I don't know, I'd have to have lots of conversation with you and with all of you guys, but my first instinct is to say, come back to the familiar and build on that security and safety first before you make a change. What do you think, Paula?
I totally agree. We had, and some of this came up today in one of our discussions, that we just need to slow down and absolutely support them with the familiarity of the educators that they refuse to, and before they make those transitions. Might be difficult, but
yeah, and remember that these age divisions are arbitrary. You know, they're by policy rather than by development, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, no, it's true. I totally understand that.
Need the flexibility in this first part. Yeah.
Okay, I'm just checking to make sure. There was a few questions that came in. A lot of questions came in. I'm just making sure I got to them all. People were, lots of great questions. We even one wanted to talk about the 5 stressors that you mentioned and what they were. If maybe you can talk
so
about
that was the 5 domains.
Oh, was that okay? Sorry. Sorry. All right. There was one other question about Stephen DeGroot. Last time we were together, you talked about Stephen DeGroot's the core 4. And I know people were asking a lot about that this week. Could you maybe talk a little bit about that once more?
Sure. Yeah. So Stephen is my very, very good friend, Steve, and so he has he's got had a fabulous career, starting off in social services, working with kids in child welfare, working in kids in juvenile justice, and so he has been a professor of human development, and so he's really thought long and hard about what gives us meaning and what makes life meaningful. And so he talks about the core 4 as when our needs, our values, our goals, and our strengths are aligned, then we have this sense of, oh man, it's our best self. We're doing things that have meaning for us and are meaningful. But when we run into conflict with others, so for example, the question that that was asked about, what do you do if you're getting pressure from your board to focus on numeracy and literacy when what your gut is saying is you should be focusing on social and emotional sense of belonging and connection. So those two are in conflict because the needs, values, goals, and strengths of one system are rubbing against the needs, values, goals of another. So when you see it, then that's when you need to have conversation and dialogue. So when full day kindergarten came about, the healthy teams were the ones that said, well, I think this is what we should be doing. We should be nurturing the kids. And the other was saying, well, no, we have to get them ready for grade 1. Well, the successful teams were the ones who saw our needs are different here. Right. How can we get to yes?
Right.
So we have to ask, what do you need? What's important to you? What difference would that make? And what do you bring to that equation? So that's what the needs, values, goals, and strengths, that conversation is about. I think the example we may have used when we were talking about it was, a mum who's out and her child misbehaves.
Right.
And she gets all upset, and another mum, the child misbehaves and she doesn't get upset at all. And it's because their needs, values, goals are different. So the mum whose child gets upset and she jumps on them to say, yeah, blah, 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 is what she has a need for her child to behave in order to reflect better on her. Because when the child doesn't behave, doesn't listen to her, she feels disrespected, her needs, values, and goals are not there, and she thinks she looks bad as a parent. Whereas the other, the needs, values, goals are very different. She thinks when her child misbehaves, her role is to figure out, well, what's going on and be a stress detective, right? So
right. Yes.
That's a little introduction. I would love for us, ASCY and I, to bring Steve in and do some deep learning on his principles.
Well, something to look forward to, for sure. There's so many possibilities here. We can go on and on. Luckily, we have 2 more sessions.
Yes, great.
I'm just looking. There's a question actually in the chat box. I'm going to read it. If we don't reopen school until September, how can we support older ones who are feeling anxious that they will be going to a new grade, new teacher, and all these rules about staying apart? Is there a way for us to advocate so the school board considers allowing kids to go back to their teacher and peers?
Sorry, is there a way for us to advocate?
That they can go, school considers allowing kids to go back to their teachers and their peers. I mean, probably a question out of our, Yeah.
No, I think that would make sense from a kind of child development perspective, but from a logistics of education, it would be very, very difficult. So what I would be recommending is that the old teacher, the kid's previous teacher, visits the class to have a closing ceremony, whether that happens over the first week, to have some sense of closure for that the school didn't end well, because kids feel it. I've had principals who have been seconded elsewhere tell me about little kids coming up and saying, why did you leave me? Why did you leave me? Exactly. And so I think it would be really important for the previous teacher to come to the new class and spend some time just chilling, just saying, how are you doing? I missed you. Sorry we didn't get to finish our year. Let's move on and stay in touch. Stop by my room. Tell me how you're doing. So that kind of reaching out, feeling felt by their old teacher, I think would make a huge difference.
I agree. Thank you so much, Dr. Jane. That's a wonderful piece of advice. Yeah. And I'm just gonna, I think there's, I'm looking at the time. There's one more question that we can ask. Okay. What are some things we can do or say to help children feel safe when they are scared because of the possible outcomes due to COVID-19? Some children may have been directly affected by the virus.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a very real concern. And so I think the thing that we should be telling most kids is that there are people who care a lot about them, who care a lot about the health of the population, who are working very, very hard to keep people safe. I think that's a message that we need to, I think it's easier for us in Canada than it is for poor children in the US. But I think that's a message that we should be giving them, that there are very, very caring people who are trying to figure out how to keep as many people safe as possible. For those for the kids who may have experienced a family member who has died, I think you have to give the messages and the support that you would give for the death of anybody through anything at all, you know, for whatever reason. But the other thing is to say that the number of people who die and the people who are at risk of dying are not the ones who are coming to school.
Yes.
Yeah. There, and I wouldn't go much further than that.
Right.
And that people are still trying to do the safe thing that they can. You know, ideally, I think that it should be once we have a vaccine that that kids go back to school. But you know, that's a whole other story. That's a whole other story. Yeah.
It is. I think, yes. So lots of the chat box, people are grateful for those ideas of the educator going back to the transitioning to a new grade, a new school, just that idea of the educator that they had before the COVID to connect with them to connect with them when they return to school. We had one more a transition question before we end. And what advice do you have for educators to support children transitioning into grade 1 from our inquiry-based kindergarten program and after being isolated for so long due to COVID? I think you might have touched on this again.
Oh,
but,
so no, I think we have to, all of us on this call need to think of us as being revolutionaries, like my friend Jim Grieve, who was the associate deputy minister of the early years. He said, first we take kindergarten, then we take grade 1. I think it's really important that kindergarten teachers and grade 1 teachers be having intentional dialogue about how can we continue this play-based, inquiry-led learning pedagogy continue into the next division. So yes. I think kids make the transition. They do, but it's a much easier transition when the adult educators involved are thinking completely about what is the experience of the child here. Mm-hmm. How are they learning rather than how am I teaching?
I love it. Thank you so much.
Yes. Oh, you're so welcome, Paula.
That is wonderful. I'm glad that we got through this session in this way.
So resilience in action.
Yeah, it's my pleasure to always to speak with you. So now I'm happy that I had another opportunity with you tonight. Right, you've always been our community champion, and we thank you for spending time with us tonight.
What a pleasure.
Yes, and we look forward to our conversation next week at the same time. Hopefully our networks will be a bit more successful with everyone. But so just a note to the people in the audience, the attendees, thank you for bearing with us tonight on this new format. Please visit the ASCY website on Monday, May 11th for our next YouTube link that will be available. And from there, we'll be talking in that segment, we'll be talking a bit more about resiliency in our 4-part series. That'll be the 3rd segment on surviving and thriving through COVID. Connection is key. And then from that, you can have a link to connect with us next week at the same time for our Q&A session and for the next invite. So again, good night to everyone. Good night. Thank you, Dr. Jean, once more. It's such a pleasure to talk to you. It's always so informative and so wonderful. You're just a wealth of knowledge. Just a pleasure.
Great. Thank you. My pleasure. My pleasure. And thank you, Sue, and all the team.
And good night to everyone. And we hope to see you all again next week. Stay safe and see you next time. Bye-bye.